Dobar dan, mili приятели. Hello, fellow architects who happen not to speak Bulgarian. I'm Mačej Gil and I work for Juvenes-Projekt, a company responsible for the project that I'm going to show you in coming slides. Hello again. In the short introduction video, you could see that the whole project is already completed and it has finally launched in the year 2018. So by now, 2020, everything is operating and it's a vivid living space. But of course, it wasn't like this all the time. And the whole designing part and then building whole process took more than 10 years altogether. And a side personal note, that was the first project that I was involved in after graduation, and I'm almost 40. So basically, yeah, that's a big part of my life, and I'm going to show you my personal views and the parts that I was involved in after this short description of the whole project as it is. Before I continue with some details, there is this main thought of mine I'd like to emphasize. In my opinion, a revitalization is a field for people with passion. So there has to be love for architecture, for heritage, because money and the regular business skills, that's not enough. It's a big struggle. It's a lot of work. And if you're just a developer, you probably might consider doing just the new stuff, since this project and similar project takes a lot of time, a lot of strength, a lot of people's involvement. So basically, if there was no man with a passion, that's my boss, Krzysztof Tyszkiewicz, it wouldn't happen. I didn't know him in those times, but what I heard from stories is that each time he used to pass this abandoned old vodka factory in decay, he just dreamed about turning into a living place, a new center of the right bank, Warsaw. But passion is not enough when you don't have funds. So although Juvenes-Projekt is a part of bigger developer, that's BBI. We still needed some extra money, so we joined the venture with Belgium development company Liebrecht and Wood that provided the funds and also some major guidelines for the future function of the complex. So we have the factors for a perfect revitalization, in my opinion. That's the man with passion. Then there is the love for heritage. Then there is funds. And last but not least is the cooperation with the local authorities. Since especially you architects, you might know that we have ideas, we love our ideas, we love our projects. And in the end, sometimes we just need an outside point of view to make it better. So in this case, the Heritage Office, the Conservation Office authorities in Warsaw were our partners. Obviously, because of the law, the Conservation Office needs to approve on building permit. So in the end, everything you will see is something in the midway between the need of gain, it's still business, architects' passion, and authorities' rulings. So there are three main factors that probably you're aware of that exist. So what is it all about? As I told you before, Connoisseur was a vodka factory. It's located in Praga district, that's right riverbank of Warsaw. The district of Praga is a district that during the Industrial Revolution was the industrial part of the city. And also this is a district that was least affected by the Second World War bombings and systematic demolition of the Second World War. Most of the companies that operated in Praga lasted till 1990s or early 2000s. Same for Connoisseur, and then it got bankrupt. One might think, how is it possible for a vodka factory in Poland to go bankrupt? But anyway, it happened. This particular slide shows the very first phase of the history on a map, which is important for me, for my work, since it shows the yellow part that was the Tsar Russian part, and the blue part that was built by Polish businessmen, that's noblemen and some other people. Why is this important? Because later, during the reconstruction, knowing the history, you can, for instance, distinguish the materials between different, not only different phases, but also different owners. So the buildings in blue were least decorated. The brick was a little bit different size and different color. Whereas in yellow, the material was better and ornamentation was more sophisticated. Same for the foundations of the buildings. So the ones in the yellow had really low foundations deep in the ground, whereas those in the blue part were cheaper and they were quite shallow. So these factors really matter later during the project. So it was very necessary to check all of those things regarding the historical and also ownership in the field. The company grew, and in the year 1919, the two parts joined into one quite soon after Poland regained its independence. In the year 1923, a national mint was being located in one of the buildings, and that I'm going to show you later in the end of the presentation. Here's a view from 1927. You don't know that yet, but only the front building, the one to the left, is still there. The one to the right was almost completely destroyed during the Second World War. Only the very, very last part to the right exists to now. By the year 1937, the whole parcel was very densely built up. What's very important on this plan are the railways. They served as a connection between the main railway from the neighboring railway network. What's important about them is that we like the idea, we like the shape, and although they weren't there by the time we started operating in Connoisseur, we decided to make a resemblance in the project for the pavings. So if you pay attention later, you can see the railway kind of patterns all over the squares. So here we are. This is how it looks from up above. As you can see, it is a whole quarter of a street, whole block, and you may notice that the buildings that are inside the interior are much smaller than those outside. This made this concluded in a feeling that when you enter the whole complex, you enter a different world. So that's a surprise. This one here is the first one renovated, and also this is the one that's the most famous in the whole complex for its very ornamental architecture. This is where originally the management used to be placed. Also residential, but new. These buildings, with those that I showed you before, form the residential part of the complex. One of the smallest heritage buildings in the complex was a workshop, and now after the revitalization it's going to serve as a restaurant. The main part of the complex, formed by new buildings, contain offices and retail. As you might have noticed by now, the majority of the space is new buildings, so it was a hard task to make the old, the heritage, the most important. A passage covered shopping street. Yet again, offices. And the only avant-garde building in the whole complex, that's an event venue. Heritage building, retail and offices. A heritage building that hosts Google for startups. One of the 7 Google-run startup venues, the others being in London, Tel Aviv, Madrid, Seoul, Sao Paulo and Tokyo, that help the young people develop their projects. A former rectification building, nowadays hosting a Polish vodka museum. A former spirits storage building, hosting Syreni Śpiew, that's one of the most famous Warsaw pub that needed to find a new location. And Moxie, a contemporary branch of Marriott hotel chains. So now I'm going to introduce some more details about the buildings that I listed so far. The first going to be the building that is an event venue, also being the connoisseur's most avant-garde building. As you can clearly see, the building consists mostly of one big-scale venue with an adjacent monumental staircase. There is no kitchen, so all the food needs to be catered. But what's most important is that's one of the very few venues in Warsaw that can hold events needing huge spaces. It is worth mentioning that the building is equipped with facilities allowing different kinds of fairs to take place, including display of cars on the first floor. The view from outside. This is how it looked like before us. The concrete hall from 1960s has been demolished and replaced with the new building. Please pay attention to the concrete bridge on the left side of the picture. It was an inspiration for a concrete bridge nowadays. I forgot to mention the previous building has been designed and managed by my colleague Sławomir Stankiewicz and his assistants. That's mostly Kinga Woźniak. And these are the residential buildings. One of them, the northern one, designed in our company, the project by Krzysztof Matwiejuk, and of course with help of his assistants, mostly Łukasz Malaszewski and Iwona Moniewska. And the southern one that was outsourced to a different studio, that's Are by Mr. Wacławek and Mr. Stiasny. As you may notice, the plan is pretty irregular and consists of a variety of flats of different shapes and sizes, allowing the future residents to feel individual. In order to reduce the number of staircases, we introduced a glazed bridge over the main entrance to the edifice. It's a high-end building, so only quality materials has been used. For instance, full-sized brick. So we're not dealing here with thin tiles imitating brick wall. The other feature is the height of the flats themselves. It's 3 meters inside, so that's more than the regular flats. Also, the adjacent cubicles that allows the daylight inside the flats make, altogether with other factors I listed before, atmosphere of an industrial place. So we decided to call the place a soft loft place. That is, these are not lofts because the building is new, but the general atmosphere to it is like an industrial place. Therefore, we called it a soft loft. The view from the inner playground, as you might notice, there is a grayish building in the front. That's only 3 floors, and there's one behind that's 6 floors. So the reason to make 2 different heights of the new buildings was the old one. So we didn't want to suppress the old one with the scale. Therefore, part of the new building is more or less the same size as the old building. The main block of the complex, designed by Krzysztof Matwiejuk and his team, that's Łukasz Malaszewski, Iwona Moniewska, Michał Cyruchin, Krzysztof Cegiełko, Michał Adamczyk. I hope not to forget anyone. I wasn't really involved in this one. So what I want to pay attention to is that in the forthcoming slides, you're going to see the amount of the building that is underground and how much it is comparing to what's over the ground. Since we didn't want to put almost any, or let's say any technical equipment on the roofs, since the buildings in the middle of the complex are smaller than the surrounding ones, we didn't want to spoil the view. So what nowadays everyone does is putting all the equipment on top of the roofs was not an option. The building consists of 3 parking lot floors that have connections with all the surrounding buildings, including the old ones. The ground floor plan consists of 3 different zones connected with a roofed street. The size and the shape of those zones is inspired by the buildings that previously stood in the very same place. The 3rd floor, you can see how gradually the buildings are ascending towards the outer line of the complex. Cross sections. The upper right one clearly shows the ratio of what's underground and overground. So as I told you, the vast majority is underground. And the lower one shows, among other things, also the trusses supporting the roof. These were exhibited inside the spaces to add to the industrial atmosphere. Some outside views. And this is the interior. What we can see here is the roofed covered street. So in order to make the buildings even more little in the size, we decided to introduce the furnishing of the facade made of the same materials that we use outside, in order for it to look more like a street, not like an interior corridor or a passage. Some outside views and a view from above. So what we get is a very nicely done roof made of titanium steel with no extra stuff going on top of them. And finally, my favorite, the first heritage building that I'm going to describe to you in detail, the project by Jacek Michalak. And yeah, this is the one that I can say that I also have some contribution in it, since I'm the person who's dealing with all the heritage stuff in the company. Juvenes-Projekt as a studio was responsible for the overall management and the outside architecture of the building, but the interiors are outsourced to Massive Design Studio. Therefore, I've been more concentrating on what's going on outside. This is how it looks nowadays. Please imagine that there was almost no window, no ornamentation, and the brick colors were very random because this building was the one that was changed most during the history. The outside views with some details that I'm going to describe later, and interiors by Massive Design. The ground plan of the original building, the funny shaped roundish things are foundations of the huge silos previously containing spirit that were a problem since they were measuring more than 1 meter in height, and they are all made of concrete. Please pay attention that the whole space is quite a vast in sizes. By the time we got there, we got in the building, there was almost no equipment. The huge silos weren't there, but there still were some operating units from 1980s and old phones from 1980s probably that weren't really protected by the authorities, but still we decided to use them later. And that's the same floor after the renovation. So basically what we did, we just only left the major walls standing, and we removed all the walls, the later walls from inside, allowing the new function to take place. And that's the next level. So previously the whole space was one space. There were no division for floorings, but since the new function needed more space and didn't need these big heights, the whole building was divided into new floors. So that tragic view is the buildings before the renovation. As you can see clearly, most of the windows are walled up, and the brick wall has different colors. That means different phases. And if you look really closely, you might notice that the only original parts of the buildings, what you can see on the first floor between the first 3 windows, so the darker orange brick, that's the only original facade that has been left. Before taking any actions, there has to be a survey done. And here you can see a bit of a facade with recognition of different issues that are going on the wall itself. So unfortunately it's all in Polish, but basically you need to recognize everything what's there in order to choose a proper way of restoration, whether it is just renovation of the facade, or it is replacement, or this is reintroducing the windows and the doors in their original positions. Since the whole complex is equipped with 3 or 2 levels of underground parking lot, we needed to lower the foundations of the existing heritage buildings. In this case, the used technology is the jet grounding. As I have mentioned before, we managed to find some pretty interesting artifacts all over the building, and although we haven't been the studio that designed interiors, we held those objects to the architects of Massive Design Studio in order for them to use in their project. So in here you can see some electric board, which is not really a heritage thing. It could easily be from 1990s or 1970s. Hard to tell. But what you can see on the left side of the picture is that it's lit up now, although it's not used for its original purposes. It's just for the beauty of it. While sharing my profound thoughts and personal opinions on the beginning of this very presentation, by saying a passion, I meant a thing like that. What we are dealing with in here is was a scale two wagons filled with spirit in the 19th century. Although the object itself wasn't protected by authorities, it was breaking our heart to just get rid of it. And although it was in a very, very bad shape, we decided to renovate it and found it a new function. From outer furniture through sculpture or just installation, we finally managed to find a proper destination for the object, and it's serving now as a terrace of campus. So it's not on its original position, and it's also leveled up, but now we can admire its beauty. What we can see here is the main entrance to the edifice. Since the building is an old one and it was in very, very bad shape, we decided to make it beautiful again, but we needed a big entrance. So we used the holes that had been carved in the walls later in the 20th century, in order not to remove more of the original substance. And that's the only part from the outer look of the building that we introduce something modern. So in this case, these are the steel made sheets with particle pattern. And another personal side note, I guess that's my biggest imprint in the whole investigation. So yeah, that's my design in here. As I told you, architects are proud of their inventions. And now finally we got to another field that makes my heart beat faster. As a postgrad architecture researcher, I was very, very pleased to find the old picture that you can see on the upper left corner. The quality was good enough. Well, you cannot see it here, but you need to believe me. The quality was good enough to make a reconstruction of the original top of the building brick by brick, reconstructing exactly the same pattern that was there before. And the drawing of it, you can see on the right lower corner of the picture. What I'd like to mention here is that obviously it is the best way of reconstruction. Like, you can be sure of what was there before and you're doing exactly the same thing. But also, as you can see, I needed to make some extra cross sections, mostly because nowadays there's really a lack of professionals who can build a wall like that. Here we go. This is before and this is after. Before and after. Before and after. Before and after. The next comes another heritage building, the most spectacular one, the former rectification tower that hosts nowadays Muzeum Polskiej Wódki. That's the museums of Polish Vodka Museum. The project was was led by Sławomir Stankiewicz and his team, mostly Kinga Woźniak, and this applies to the general management and all the exteriors, the main construction, etc. But as for the interiors, it was an outsourced studio, which was chosen by the museum, and that's Nizio Design. Some outside views. That's the only building that preserved the original metal windows that served as a sample for reconstruction of all the other windows all over the complex. What you can see here, window-wise, are all new windows that are fulfilling the thermal needs of contemporary buildings. So they are all warm. But the most important architectural feature of the outside is a terrace that you can see over the right part of the building. I'm going to describe it more later. In here you can see the interiors of the museum. Again, not our design, but also an interior of a restaurant, not our design as well. But what's important here is that the authors managed to do well within the industrial heritage, industrial environment. My personal favorite is the left upper one. As you can see, the lighting uses two different ways, manners. One of them resembles the original lamps that held in this place, but the other one, it's a system of pipes. So previously this room was a boiler room, and there were a lot of different kind of pipes in there. So it served as a great inspiration. Some more views of the interiors. I recommend visiting the museum. And another type of the function in there, since Museum of Vodka really means trying the vodka, there are several different kinds of bars and pubs inside. This is one of them. And there are some special people on this picture. There are two bosses. The one in the middle is Krzysztof Tyszkiewicz, the man with the passion I was mentioning in the very beginning. And to the right is Rafał Szczepański, the boss of Juvenes and BBI. This is a drawing showing the state of the building, the time when we got there. So we have some original walls outside and major walls inside, but there's a lot of added walls within the former bigger spaces. There are three important features that I will show you now, describe now, and then describe in detail later. So in the middle part where the B section is, this is the rectification tower. You can easily see from the outside. That's the highest part. So as you can see, there is a staircase there, and there's a lot of different kinds of smaller rooms, mostly toilets, and there is the elevator. So basically all of those things they are not originals for this space. The space originally was one big multi-story space where there was the rectification tower, which is like consists of a huge silo and a lot of different pipes and stuff. So it has been changed. What we wanted to do was to bring back its original shape. And that meant that we needed to find a new place for the communication. That's the staircase and the elevator. The other thing that I want to point to you is the big room on the left, close to the D section side, which has 4 concrete pillars inside. We needed to make some special kind of activities in order to sustain the building. So I'm going to show you that later. And the last thing is the staircase in the upper left corner that I'm going to describe later as well. So there it is. This is the project. You can still see those 4 pillars. You can see that the staircase and the elevator moved from the main central space to the left. And you can see that the big spaces are cleared up from the smaller divisions. Yet again, the survey this time is the rectification tower, and you can see the preserved old windows on it. So these are the only originals. And this is how it looked before the renovation. It's not exactly the same view. This is the same tower from the other side. Therefore, it's only 3 of the old windows on it, and the other ones are walled up. And you can see the new reconstruction. It's like a construction on the right upper side of the building. So this is then, and this is now. So that's a huge difference. And this is now again. But what you can clearly see here is the terrace I was mentioning before. So the terrace, it has a function as a viewing port, and it is open for public. What's important here, so it doesn't belong to any particular tenant, sorry. No particular tenant, it's public. And the structure that you can see behind the terrace, it's the elevator, and this is the staircase. So this is the only way to get to the floor in the rectification tower, as you can see. So we go outside and you go inside. Yet again, the same thing. We needed to lower the foundations, so just grounding again. And to the right, you can see the same process under the huge boilers. So there were really immense boilers inside. The only preserved original equipment of the vodka factory, with the exception of smaller minor silos, that all of them are being used in the decor of interiors. So finally we get to some interesting engineering. This picture shows the project of suspension of the pillar. You may remember it from the first floor drawing that I showed you of this building. So what you can seeing here is, it's a way of managing and putting the jet grounding under the not so deep foundations and creating the basement that wasn't existent in order to connect the building with the parking lot. So what we needed to do, we needed to suspend the pillar over ground so that the building doesn't collapse, and that we can make the concrete slab under it. And when we finally place the pillar on a new foundation, that is the concrete slab, we remove the triangle supporters. So that's how it looked like during the works. In the middle, you can see the original pillar and 3 different beams. The lower one, of course, under the lower one, there be the slab, the concrete slab, built shortly thereafter. What you can see here is the third thing that I ask you to pay attention to while describing the building in the beginning. So that's the metal staircase. What's important is that we wanted to use all the material, the original material, in the new staircase. But since this one here is an old one, with the size of the steps and the size of the railing, and also the spaces between the poles being not really close to what we are obliged to fulfill with the contemporary laws, we needed to make a change. So one of the things was to make the railing, the banister, higher. In here, the banister is more or less like 80 centimeters, and we need 110 in Poland. And between the poles, there mustn't be any free space unless it's less than 12 centimeters. So yeah, basically we don't fulfill that in here. But we really wanted to keep the poles, which are from the first phase of the building. They are 19th century and they are cast. So this is what we've done. We used the old poles. We added some extra extension from below. And this is the cubicle there. And we added some extra extension from above. Yeah, that's the reconstruction of the staircase. As you can see, this is the same style, but since the original material was in decay and deteriorating, we needed to replace it with new material in the original shape. So that's the result, not maybe the result. This is the very last stage of the building, but you can already see that we use the poles, the cast poles, the spaces between them to fulfill the loads. So, and the main structure. So it still looks pretty historical, although it has been changed. What you can see here, this is the outside of building. That's a window, obviously, but it's not an original. Same as for the metal ones, the wooden ones, there were just few in the whole complex that we could certainly say that are 19th century. This obviously is not. So, well, that's again, this is a before picture. This is an after picture. This time it it's about the window itself. The windows. It is a problem. I guess it's an international problem that the windows themselves, they are quite not really getting the attention they should get. Mostly is because the proper reconstruction is really expensive. And also, I guess sometimes the designers, they have no idea or maybe no sensibility. I don't know. Anyway, what we can see in here is part of design of the windows. The picture to the left with the letter C on it, it's a section of the original window itself. So yeah, we were the bad guys and we took the original window and we cut it into several pieces in order to see the original profiles of the window, of the wooden work. Since the window was covered with several layers of paint, this action allowed us to make a really precise drawing of reconstruction. So what you can see on the picture, number C, it's also on the drawing with the name próbka C. And what you can see to the right, it's the outer part of the window. The outer part has the same profiles, but the only difference is that it's a little bit wider in order to allow the double glazing inside. So altogether, this makes a warm window that fulfills the contemporary thermical requirements. Different section, but the same story, except for I wanted to warn you that it's not as easy as it might look like. Every single manufacturer that was delivering the reconstructed windows in the first place wanted to change the profiles into modern ones that only partly look like the historical. Unfortunately, for a reason I don't know, the contemporary things that are supposed to look like the historical have different set of profiles. So we literally made the manufacturers buying new cutting profiles for their lathes in order to make a precise, exact reconstruction. Here's an example of what a proper conservation means to us, and I guess should mean in general. Pay attention to the screws. So what you can see here is a single slotted screw, the same as the originals, whereas most likely when you don't think about this detail, you will get a so-called Phillips screw, so the one with a cross inside. Yet again, a before, this time it's about the metal window. Another after about the metal window. A before and an after. A before and an after. The Moxie Hotel. This is a tricky building in terms it is a heritage one, but only partly. What you can see here, is the only surviving part of the old building. I mean, the two outer parts, well, they're obviously looking older. Also, that's a building that had quite a destroyed facade. The other original part of the building, its cellar, yeah, that I'm going to describe shortly. Yet another survey, and the state before. As I told you, the facades were in decay. The original brick wall was replaced by plaster formed in a shape of brick. And this is how it looks like after renovation. So not only we replace the walls with new ones using special kind of brick with the proper size and proper shapes. We replaced the windows on the first floor for wooden ones, and those on the ground floor, the metal ones. And these on the ground floor, these are the only ones that we restored, not only using the original outer shape, but also using the original technique. So it's a smith and work. The last phase of reconstruction, and the smith and work windows to the right, and the project of the main entrance to the building. As you can see, the main lobby of the building is on the underground level. This is mostly due to the fact that the original cellar was the only surviving part of this part of the building. So in order to use it in the most spectacular way, the idea was to have lobby on underground level. But since the lobby is the most important part of the building, there has to be an idea that would solve this problem. Of course, like all the greatest ideas, there's always some problematic aftermath. So in this case, it was the height. We needed to have the more bigger, spacious rooms for the lobby. And since the original pillars, the cast pillars, were too short, there has to be a solution done. In this case, what you can see in here, it is engineer's solution to lengthen the pillars. What you can see in here is the render of the project of the interior. Yet again, not ours. And you can see the pillars that I was referring to on the previous slide. Moxie is a lifestyle branch of Marriott chain, and this particular building was being selected as the most beautiful Moxie building in the world. The last building that I'm going to describe is the former Mint that changed its function to residential. So this is how it looked like when we got there. And this is how we wanted to change it. So basically wanted to add the extra floor and to gain more space for the flats. And this is when the authorities came. I really like this example because obviously I can understand the developer that is doing business and wants to have more income from his work. But also obviously I can understand the heritage authorities that want to preserve the building in the most proper shape. So what you're going to see in the next slide, it is a compromise between the business and the let's say conservatory point of view. Voila. And I think this is a good compromise. Yet another favorites of mine, what you can see, it's banister in the building. It consists of cast balusters of Neo-Gothic style, well, influenced by Neo-Gothic. But what was the problem? It was their height. They were yet again around 70 centimeters, and what we needed was 110. So we needed to find a solution. What you can see on the picture to the right is the result, but it wasn't that easy. We tried different ways. These are the ways. So basically, the less we wanted to be in the style, the worse it looked like. So in the end, we decided to just lie a bit, and that's the result. And I really think it looks good. So what you can see here is the upper part, which is the original baluster, and then the lower part, which is also a cast one, and it is inspired by the original. It is a detail, but you can imagine that we did cast balusters. That's something very, very unusual. This is the outside of the same building and more or less the same situation. In here we have maybe Art Deco staircase, outside staircase. Well, let's call it stairs. And the same problem, that is the sizes of the steps themselves and the banister. So quite a smallish looking stairs needed to be changed into a vast construction because of the contemporary rulings. But we managed to keep them in the style. And that's the last thing I wanted to show to you. So I told you the authorities, the regulations, we are obliged to protect the protected buildings. But what if something's not protected, but is historical? This is a case. So originally, this building was security house of the complex. And then it was changed into transformation. Sorry. Transformer station. So, yeah, we could just pull it down and create the entrance to the complex in here, because this is what we wanted to have in here. We wanted to have a broad entrance to the complex. But on the other side, it was so heartbreaking to just pull down an original wall, which is only a part of the original building, but still it was sad. So we found a solution. Yet again, the old picture was helpful. As you can see to the right, this is the house, the security house, the warden house, how it looked like originally. And yet again, the picture is very, very, very precise. So if you looked up close, you can see all the bricks that are there on the picture. So yet again, we could make 100% precise reconstruction. But we didn't need it there. So what we done is we just recreated the top of the main wall that survived, and you could see in the previous picture. And we recreated the shape of the roof as a roofing for the main gate. But since we didn't need the main entrance, the main wall that's facing the street, we needed the main entrance there. We just didn't recreate it there. So basically what you can see to the left, it is the shape of a house using the original wall with a partial reconstruction. And these are some parts of the original blueprints that we used to reconstruct it. So the one that you see above is the original state, which we haven't seen, and you can see only in the picture. The middle one is what we got when we get there, and the lower one is the project itself. And finally, we managed to get to the end. This is the last slide. What I wanted to show to you in here is how a tedious work the whole construction process is. Nowadays, when we have all those contemporary technologies, there's very little people who know how to reconstruct, like to build up an original way, a single pillar like in here. So basically, there was a need in drawing every single layer, unique layer of a pillar like this one in order for it to be built up the proper way, which is obviously not a case in 19th century. They just knew the way, and they just knew basically what there should be in there. But nowadays, unfortunately, not. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed it.